Satu, dua, tiga.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. We are from the first group of reading English fiction. We will present an analysis of a short story entitled The Yellow Wallpaper. Next slide, please. So here's our group members, consisted of me, Rahmatul Fitri, the second is Sandi Toga, and the last is Yuvika Dwi Aprilia. Next slide, please. Okay, before we discuss further about the analysis, we start with the introduction of the story. The Yellow Wallpaper is a short story by American writer Charlotte Perkins Gilman, first published in January 1892 in the New England magazine. And I want to add more about the narrator. So Charlotte actually have same experience or same thing like the story that she made. When she was 24, she married an artist. In 1885, she had a daughter, but soon after the birth of the girl, Charlotte had a nervous breakdown. At her husband urging, she spent a month in the sanitarium of Dr. Eswer Michel, a physician who specialized in treating women with the nervous disorders. Because the treatment, the isolation, and the total rest nearly drove her to insanity, she fled Michelle and her husband. And this story written after she had been treated by Eswer Michelle for her nervous breakdown. So, without any further ado, let's discuss more about the analysis of the short story, which is the Yellow Wallpaper. Next slide, please. So this material will be presented by Yuvika. Yuvika, time is yours.
Alright, thank you very much, Rahma. So my name is Yuvika, and here I will explain about the plot of the story. So for this story, the structure is linear. The plot is in chronological order, and then at the beginning of the story, it starts with the narrator, who is the main character, move into a house with her husband in order to get better because she is diagnosed with a nervous condition. And then the narrator and her husband live on the second floor of the house. And here starts the rising action or the middle of the story. It is when the narrator doesn't like the wallpaper. She wants to change, but her husband refused. And as time goes on, the narrator becomes more fascinated by the wallpaper, and sometimes she sees a woman creeping along with the wallpaper, and then she knows that the woman inside the wallpaper looks like imprisoned, and the narrator becomes focused on the wallpaper and excited about the woman. She wants to help this woman out of the wallpaper, and then she starts to spend more time to observe the wallpaper. And then here is the climax, when actually the woman inside the wallpaper is herself, the narrator itself. And then the narrator, who is willing to help this woman, starts tearing off the paper. And then at the end of the story, the narrator becomes insane. And when her husband enters her room, he sees his wife creeping. And then the narrator said, "I have pulled off I have pulled off most of the paper, so you can't put me back." That's all for the plot of the story. And the next will be explained by Sandy Toga. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the time. My name is Sandi Toga, and I will continue our explanation about our analysis. So now I'd like to explain about the character. As far as we know, there are four characters in this story. The first one is the woman. Yes, the woman. The woman is the narrator of the story itself. She is a young, upper middle class woman, freshly married and a mother, who is receiving depression treatment. Though her physician feels she has a nervous condition, she is a very creative and wonderful storyteller. Her private journal, in which she notes her thoughts as her patient with the wallpaper deepens, is used to tell the narrative. And the second one is John. John is the narrator husband and her physician also. As a part of her rehab, John limits her movement. John, unlike his imaginative wife, he is a realist who prefers facts rather than fantasy. He shows the love to his wife, but he is unaware of the harmful impact of his action has on her. The second one is Jennie. Jennie is John's sister and their housekeeper too. And the last one is Mary. Mary is the character that mentioned only once in the beginning of the tale when the narrator is expressing her inability to care for her baby. And the narrator is thankful that the nursemaid Mary is so good with the baby. Next slide, please. All right, the time settings and era of the yellow wallpaper is somewhere around early 1900s, a moment of social transformation and the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, a time when men ruled all aspects of life, including social, economic, and marital difficulties. And the location of the yellow wallpaper emphasize all the story's intangible emotions and attitudes. The place settings sets in a beautiful house, but it's placed back from the road and has a lot of locks and separate teeny buildings. This is a very remote and isolating location. The house is characterized as a place that ties and restricts people since it is secluded from the road and thus from society. What exactly do we mean when we say this? Let's start with the passage. The house is quite alone, standing well back from the road, quite 3 miles from the village. It makes me think of English places that you read about, for there are hedges and walls, and that gets the lock, and lots of separate little houses for the gardeners and people. Yes, she feels that she is isolated and restricted, and her mental state reflects the physical layout of the house. Within the house itself, the narrator is primarily confined to big airy room with windows that look always. In keeping with the themes of isolation and restrictions, the windows that look out everywhere are barred, preventing any sort of escape. The narrator is able to see but not participate in what happens outside the room. Maybe that's all from me. The next slide will be presented by Rahmatul Fitri. Thank you.
So I'm Rahma. I want to talk about the narrative point of view of the story. So we assume that the narrative point of view of the Yellow Wallpaper is strict first-person narrative because the story tells us deeply about the narrator's feelings and thought. Everything we read or we know is about the narrator's feelings or perspective. The narrator is also the protagonist of the story. Throughout the story, the protagonist suffers a mental breakdown, but because she is the one who telling the story, we can understand better why she is acting the way she is. And the narrator is subjective uh, because the story is told through the lens of one character's experience at the time. And this story is based on her personal feelings and thoughts. For the evidence, the woman state that personally, I believe the congenial work with excitement and change would do me good. The second is, I never saw a worse paper in my life. The third is, I am a comparative burden already. The fourth is, but I find I get pretty tired when I try. And the last, I get positively angry with the impertinence of it and the everlastingness. I think that's all for me.
All right, thank you, Rahma. So, This is the last element, it is symbolism. So in the yellow wallpaper story, the yellow wallpaper is symbolized a prison for the woman or the narrator. It's because in the story we can see that the narrator sometimes sees a woman inside the wallpaper and she wants to help her out that actually the woman inside the wallpaper is herself, like her version of a woman who wants to be free. Moreover, there is a sentence said by the narrator, I have got out at last, and then, in spite of you and Jane, and I have put off most of the paper so you can't put me back. That we can infer she put off the paper in order to free the woman or herself, and she said, so you can't put me back, which means her husband or Jane can't put her back into the prison, or in this case, the wallpaper. I think that's all for the symbolism. And here are all references. That's all from our group presentation, and we can continue the discussion on Sepachar. Thank you very much.